Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Super License F1 podcast. My name's Rodney.
My name is Zach.
Zach, it's been a little while, but we're in the summer break. I hope you're feeling relaxed and limber and loosey-goosey. You especially should be.
Yeah. I've been to see Tina, my yogi, this morning. Not my personal yogi, obviously. Group of 20 or so individuals down at the local community gym doing some sun salutes and some whatevers. I don't know all the names of the things, your donkeys, your crows, the big important moves that someone would do on a Sunday morning.
It is,
I feel relaxed.
I want to go Rowan HG on you, but I won't.
The flat bag.
Trap parrot. Crazy date, etc.
Oh, my God. Oh, those are the good times. No, I'm feeling good. I feel like my voice is a little... We're just discussing off mic pre-show, as we do, getting in the vibe. Had a couple of friends over for dinner last night. Had a few drinks. Not hungover, I would say, much to my amazement, personally. But feeling like my larynx is really quite relaxed. And I just got this kind of bit of vocal fry happening today, which hopefully you'll enjoy.
Well, I'm enjoying it so far. I'm also good. Thank you for asking. It's the summer break. I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying it. Sounds like you're in the vibes. You're just vibing hard in the summer style. We've had 12 races. Unbelievably, we're just a smidge over halfway through the year. But normally we would do a bit of a halfway through the summer break type show. There's been a few races. I would argue there were probably not much to report home about them, but it's a good opportunity to reflect on the year so far. And so that is the plan today. And obviously any little bits of news or issues that we want to work in there, we can always do that. But we're going to be making a journey up the grid, Martin Brundle style, just wandering down the grid from the back to the pointy end and just sharing our opinions. Because
unlike Brundle, you and I, we're not going to be told by celebrities that we can't talk to them because this is a show where we don't want to bring anybody else in. It's just me and you, and we're going to act accordingly. We're always good to each other.
This is true.
Do you think Brundle... Do you think he silently curses people under his breath when he's like, hey, Martin Brundle from Sky, hello, Miley Cyrus, or whatever? Is that someone? Dua Lipa, probably? Talk to me, because that's why you're here. But it turns out you're not. You've been told not to talk to me. Like, why can't they get that organised? Why are we still playing that kind of...
I don't understand why there isn't somebody running over to the celebrities in advance saying, Martin Brundle will be here in 20 seconds. This is arranged with Formula One. You're going to come and you're going to say hello. You can even talk for 20 seconds and then go if you want. Yeah. But I can't believe it's such a shambles.
Yeah, talk about why you're here and the film that you're in. That you're that's because that's why you're here.
Promote the thing you're here to promote to tens of millions of people watching.
Yeah, exactly right.
That said, when he goes over and says to people, I want to talk to you, have you got a minute? And they say no. It's kind of one of my favorite things.
Just a little balm for your existence. Yeah. But to come back to my original point then, do you think that he gets upset by that? Like, do you think he tosses and turns? And is he waking up at 4 a.m. going, what could I have said differently to LeBron James to get him to talk to me?
Look, I mean, personally, I don't think he's worried. And I think if anyone brings it up with him, he would have a laugh about it. I'm sure in the moment, he's incredibly and intensely upset about it. Yes, I do. Afterwards, though, I'm sure he forgets about it.
I think that starting grid walk, if you described it to people who didn't watch Formula One, who had any sense of like anxiety or whatever, they'd be like, that's just nightmare fuel. Like that sounds like an incredibly bad nightmare. It's just like, what happened was I was walking down Formula One straight that had thousands and thousands of fans in the stands watching me. Yeah. And I had a camera crew with millions of people watching me. And I needed to wind my way through there, cold approaching celebrities who have been told that they don't have to speak to me. Yeah, that I'm not sure who they are.
I've been told you're famous.
Exactly. It's amazing that he does it. Like he must just he needs to go and teach a class on public speaking and how to make friends and influence people and how to how to network, because it's incredible. Like the only way it could be worse, it was like, and also you don't have any pants on. Like it's the only thing that could make it more of a nightmare. So yeah. Grade
So
A for Martin Brundle continuing to offer himself up for punishment every second Sunday by celebrities that don't know or care about him or even probably Formula One, really.
There was a story that I've seen because I've been trying to keep one eye on the news, and obviously, like, it's the summer break, so everything's shut down, and there's just bugger all news around. But I saw this headline: ranking the best pundits in F1. Brundle, Rosberg, and Moore all rated. Now we're about to do some rating ourselves, but at least we're talking about the teams. This is like, where do you position, Eddie Jordan over Anthony Davidson, over Nico Rosberg? It's like, who cares? Who gives a shit?
No points. They're a mixed bag, genuinely. I want, the world I want to live in genuinely is an Anthony Davidson, Kurun Chandhok world of Formula One where they've got charisma, but they also know it really well and they talk about the right things. That's where I am as a sports watcher these days. I'm like, and I know they both were racers. That's good, but it's more good for me that they weren't world champions and like that. I think people are having this with old mate Palmer as well. That it's kind of, he's doing all this stuff for F1 and F1.com, I think, and doing all this analysis.
Yeah,
he's kind of like the everyman, but he was also a Formula One driver. But he seems to be able to put it in a way that makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, give me Chandhok and Anthony. I almost said Pete Davidson. He would be good in Formula One, maybe. But Anthony Davidson, or Anthony, depending on what he is to his friends, I suppose. All day, every day. I don't need Croft anymore, and I don't need Brundle. We need Brundle for the grid walk, but then that's it.
Yeah. I was watching old clips the other day of F1, and it was commentary by Martin Brundle and... what's the guy's name? John Allen? What's the guy's name? John Allen? James Allen.
Yes.
James Allen. Just like everything that he brought, everything that Croft brought, but also just so much more knowledgeable and just so much better. And it just hasn't been the same, frankly, since.
I wonder if Croft dials it down. I think he knows the sport very well. I think he plays supplicant to Brundle because that's what Brundle's meant to be for. He's the F1 guy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been listening to David Croft for long enough that I can tell now when he's like, I am playing devil's advocate here. I am asking Martin Brundle a question so that he tells us the answer, not because I don't know, but because it makes for a better broadcast, especially for people learning the sport. But what he doesn't know is that that's our gig. Stay off our turf, mate.
No, come on. It's not like it is. We're not going to lie to you and say that maybe Lewis Hamilton will be able to make those mediums last to the end of the race and maybe we'll get something between him and Max in the last 5 laps. It doesn't happen. It never happens.
Just overtook him, but Hamilton might come back. Oh, no, wait. He's already 3 seconds behind.
Yeah. This is the greatest Formula One car ever designed. No one's getting close to it.
Well, look, this is, as much as I'm enjoying our trademark witty back and forth, tete-a-tete.
Back and back. It's all back and back on this podcast.
10 Formula One teams that we're going to go through. We're going to chat a little bit about them, give a rating. This is the mid-season, so we're calling this like the mid-year grades. We might even give a letter grade or a number, whatever you like, to each team as we go. You ready to crack into team number 10?
Yeah, I'm ready to crack it. Oh, yes. Hit me.
AlphaTauri Honda RBPT. First of all, what's the RBPT stand for? Red Bull Powertrains?
Yep, that's probably it. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Let me confirm that.
I was trying to come up with another joke, but nope. Sunday brain. Definitely
sorry.
Not.
Obviously, this isn't, last isn't where we would normally find the Red Bull sister team. They're obviously, I think, having a bit of a worse year than expected. Their drivers, formerly Nick De Vries, the delightful Yuki Tsunoda, and now the triumphant return of Daniel Ricciardo. A lot was made of the return of Daniel Ricciardo, but when you remember this team is last, I feel like a lot of the narrative is just like, oh, okay, so this is pretty low stakes then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so true. When he qualified 13th or whatever, it was actually a pretty big deal. But maybe that might have just been a bit of luck, and they were kind of turning up that weekend. But yeah, whenever in the subsequent couple of races, so what it was, did he debut? No, it was Hungary and Spa, right? He's only raced it 2 times, is that right? Yeah. Even the AlphaTauri media people and in the garage and stuff have just been like, all we want is for Daniel to drive the whole race. That's it. That's pretty much it. Drive the whole race, give us some good feedback. That's all we would like to know. And I partly wonder if that is also one of the would have eased the conversation with AlphaTauri as well. Oh man, they're going to be called Hugo Boss next year, and I cannot wait so I can stop saying AlphaTauri. And I know it's AlphaTauri, and I stumbled on it every single time because I think that I'm saying it wrongly. And then so I go to Tory, and that's not right. It's AlphaTauri, and I know that's the truth. So, AT, let's call them Honda. I think that a bit of the byproduct for them maybe is getting the feedback from someone who's been in Formula One for a very long time.
That's true.
And who might actually be able to help them improve the car. I wonder, Daniel doesn't necessarily come across as someone who would be the Alonso or Vettel type that's going to walk in and be like, hey, change all the parts to ceramic.
You could even point to the last 4 years where he's tried to do that and it's gone actually horribly wrong. Mm-hmm. So you could even make the counter argument.
Yes, exactly.
That when he's not in the best car in the grid or one of the best, he doesn't perform.
He's not as good. Yeah, that's right. So we'll see. But I think he seems in a good position. But why don't we talk about Yuki instead? Because he scored all their points.
He has.
I would not have picked his future at AlphaTauri from a couple of seasons ago, even last season. The fact that he's still making a go of it. You know, does that speak to his skill set, or does it speak to the paucity of Red Bull's young driver program ranks that maybe there isn't anybody really good to come in?
I mean, we always end up in this situation where Red Bull are like, look, not only now have we got basically arguably the best drivers on the grid in our car now, but there's also, you know, one of the Ferrari drivers, one of the, you know, this driver, one of that driver, someone at Alpine, someone, you know, half of the Williams team. They all came from us. Like half of the grid came from us. It's like, well, you sort of make a point.
Yeah, that is. It's a fine point. So yeah, I'm going to say that Yuki in a crap car, keeping it together, keeping his personality together as well. He used to be a little bit of a hothead. He's never happy when things don't go well
lately, hasn't he?
Yeah. Maybe we're just hearing less from him because they're right down the back anyways. So maybe that's it.
Maybe.
But I think he's probably, you know, these drivers still mature and grow up, and I think he probably feels a little safer there as well because he is performing pretty well. They seem pretty happy with him. He's put his head down. He's a great driver. I think that it's working nicely. You know, it mustn't be easy being kind of in the minority set of all these, you know, Europeans who all race together for like the, you know, basically there's an entire kind of class of, you're going to tell me they're all born after 2000, so let's call them all the class of 2001, who are all just there, who are all at the best teams and who all know each other since they were 6, and Yuki's not really part of that group and has come into Formula One in a different way. I think he's excelling. Whether they hold on to him past the Honda relationship, that would be interesting to see because, you know, if kind of Japan don't have any money in this team anymore, then does Yuki's spot kind of come under the spotlight a little bit? And would he be able to find a seat somewhere else if they did get rid of him? That wouldn't be unlike the Red Bull program to kind of have him drop out and we'll see him win Le Mans next year or something like that. Do you have any strong feelings on Yuki?
Don't know. I mean, obviously one scenario is Daniel gets promoted up, in which case that team will be desperate to hang on to Yuki. But if Daniel doesn't, like let's say Daniel sticks around next year and isn't promoted to Red Bull for whatever reason, then, you know, they might be less reliant on keeping Yuki around. But I mean, the problem for me becomes when you're driving in the car that's, you know, in the team at the bottom of the table, like your job is always at risk because, you know, they could put anybody in that car and still come last. They could put a guy in their car who doesn't even know what the pedals do. As long as he brings $20 million, it's all good.
Yeah, it works pretty well at the Red Bull sister team, right? Because the money pressure is not quite the same. But yeah, if you're at Williams, and look, we'll come to Williams, but it's. I don't think the same pressure is quite there. I mean, obviously, I don't know how much money Daniel brings, but I don't think it's a huge amount. It's not Perez money, that's for sure. And Perez is contracted to 2025, so I think Daniel will probably likely be, unless he gets an offer from Ferrari or something next year, because Leclerc goes to, it's going to have to be a lot of moves, and there's just not a lot of, we're not hearing about any, for the silly season, there really isn't a huge amount of moves. So, and, if Red Bull continue this good, Perez is going to be like, why would you junk me? Why would you get rid of me, essentially? And I think he'd have a pretty good case. He's got a long contract. They don't need to, pay out his contract for what purpose? To get Daniel Ricciardo in for maybe some better media? Nah. Wait until Perez is done. Daniel's in the AlphaTauri giving good data to the sister team, and then comes into the Red Bull for 2025 as the elder statesman to come second, third, and fourth for the rest of his career. I think he'd be happy with that.
Maybe more on that when we get to talking about Red Bull. But maybe to put a bow on AlphaTauri, do you want to, do we go letters or numbers?
I think letters.
Okay.
I'm going to give them the team. I'm going to give them a D because they're not very good.
Sure.
But it would be worse, except I also think that the other teams have gotten better at a faster rate. I think this is the season of a lot of teams have stood still, and that's made them look worse. They're not actually falling behind. If they're not going backwards, they're just not going forwards. So it's a D for me. What about you?
Yeah, I was also in the D area, but I think I'm going to go D- because they're last. But I mean, that said, they're only 6 points. No.
6 points shy of
8 points out of being in seventh. So it's like they don't need much, and they'll jump up into the midfield, and all of a sudden we won't be talking about these hopeless backmarkers. We'll be talking about, these hopeless back of the midfielders.
Well, I was saying
so. Look, anything could happen. But it's a D- for me.
Yeah. Well, when I was watching Hungary with some friends, they, on a dodgy stream in a chateau in the countryside in France, trying to make it work. Might have even been like a KO stream, which was interesting. So a legal stream, but on bad Wi-Fi. And
got it.
We're just saying there was just. You don't see any more crashes, really. People aren't really crashing. We're not seeing as many DNFs from crashes these days. I think every team, and I think I've said this on the show before, I think every team is being very careful about trying to get to the end all the time, whether that's a cost-cutting thing, whether the drivers just are a little more conservative than they used to be, or the teams are asking them to be like, hey, get out of the way. Like we saw in Spa, Oscar Piastri kind of went down the inside, which I kind of think was kind of fine, even though colour signs, kind of turned into...
I don't know. I think on that.
Yeah, I don't know if... Anyway, that's a tangent. But I don't think we're seeing those kinds of moves very much anymore. We get through turn one with very little incident, basically every single race now. And that just did not used to be the case. It used to be that you get through turn one and you'd be like, all right, yellow flags. The 6 guys are crashed at the back. 3 people are out. Retire the car, get the cranes out, limp back to the pits, whatever it was. Now I feel like we just get to the end of the race with 19 cars every time.
Yeah, in one way, it's all to play for still. I feel like overtaking is getting a little bit easier. And in that sense, it used to be that if you didn't qualify up the sharp end of the grid, your chances of getting into the points are pretty slim. Whereas now I feel like people feel like if there's pace in the car and they've got a full race distance ahead of them, they've got a chance. So they're maybe a bit more cautious, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Spa we had 2 DNFs. Sainz and Piastri, they had that problem at the start, right? Hungary, Hungary, we had a few more, but I don't think they were necessarily crashes. You had 3. Everyone's kind of getting there. The cars aren't really breaking down that much either.
They're doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that my point around that was, as we come into talk about next team bottom up from the grid, Alfa Romeo, unremarkable season so far. But again, as you said, the points are pretty close down the bottom of the grid because there's just no points going. If you've got a mediumly good car and everything just kind of goes to plan because no one's really crashing into each other, you're going to finish in the top 10. There's not a lot of other points kind of, by the time you get down to these bottom 4 teams, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri, these aren't even scraps. These are crumbs, morsels to go between them. So, yeah, you're right. It's just going to take one good little bit of development. And we saw it with Williams, right? They came in, we can come to them, but made the car a bit faster and now we can scrap for points. But tell me about Alfa Romeo.
Before we get to Williams, let's get to Alfa Romeo. Mr. Bottas. Mr. Zhou Guanyu. I feel like this team's been pretty anonymous, even though they're not last. I feel like we've seen even less of them. Maybe we haven't talked about them because they've still got their drivers. I feel like Valtteri Bottas really just kind of going through the motions. Zhou Guanyu really trying to show the F1 grid what he can do. I mean, on results, the two drivers fairly evenly matched. They're both, fighting for breadcrumbs, but they're both getting a couple. It's not like it's one-sided. So I don't know. In some ways, that means that Zhou Guanyu's been impressive, and Bottas has been, I don't know, disappointing.
Yeah,
is that fair?
Yeah, I think that what your hope is that when someone comes down from one of these top teams, that they're going to do more than the car can give them. But I think that I don't think either driver is necessarily outperforming the car right now. So and after 12 races, as you said, they've been very anonymous. You're just like,
and
hey,
it's
there's
not much of a
Bottas.
car, so
Yeah, and so I think Bottas is underperforming, and we'll just kind of drift around the grid, or we'll kind of drift away from Formula One. I don't think he'll get some. I don't think he's going to get a call from the pointy end of the grid one day and be like, he's not going to get.
He's certainly showing us nothing that would warrant a recall up to one of the top teams. He's really just becoming a sort of I don't know, like Nico Hülkenberg used to be.
A journeyman, of the sport.
Journeyman, yeah.
Yeah, safe pair of hands. Sorry, missed the mic there. And Zhou Guanyu, he's not also sparkling enough to make any of the top teams go, oh, we should get you in the car. So, I don't think that there's much more to say on.
I hate to say that there's just not much to say about this team, but there's probably just not much to say about this team. Just struggling and just not even looking as if they might know how to make progress, make strides.
Yeah, they're not going forwards or backwards. They're just kind of.
If I were Haas or Williams, I wouldn't be too worried.
No, exactly right. And this is. Formula One always has this. There's always a couple of teams at the back who kind of someone's got to make up the numbers, and we're not getting any new teams. Formula One's very clear about adding any more teams right now. Definitely not. Everyone's climbed up the ladder and have removed the ladder now. This is the package. this is the product. It is these 10 teams.
Everyone's in the pool. We've removed the ladder. Now everyone who's in the pool has to stay in, and no more people can get in.
Exactly.
That's the way it is. This is like The Sims, where the guy gets in the pool, you delete the ladder, and he has to sleep in the pool.
Yes, exactly. Find a way. So, I got nothing else
Grading.
on Alpha. Really not. Grade. I mean, they could be suffering because they're a Ferrari team, right? And we're about to talk about the other Ferrari team in Haas. They're not doing it. Like they can't. You can't do much with that powertrain, with that PU. There's just not. It's not giving any. It's not even giving Ferrari much either. And so you're trapped in this development cycle with Ferrari now, which is just that they don't really have much to give. It's just not fast enough. Doesn't work well enough. So under those circumstances, I think in years gone by, we'd be talking about maybe Alfa Romeo, whether they should even be in the sport anymore or not. Can they afford to be in there? But now we've got the cost caps. It's a wildly successful product, Formula One now. I don't think anybody is losing so much money that they'll have to suddenly leave the sport. We haven't heard rumours of that about any team for a little bit of time either. So, under the new world order of Formula One being pretty stable, Alfa should be doing a little bit better. So I'm going to give them an E for effort.
Ooh.
A worse grade than the worst team.
Just slightly better than the D- for AlphaTauri, but only because they've got like a couple of 8th, 9th. So, I mean, yes, AlphaTauri has 10th, but it's really just like, well, when the points were on the table, you grabbed them, but when they weren't, oh boy, there was not much going on in that garage.
Yeah, the other Ferrari
for
garage that's not Ferrari, it has to be Haas. Nicholas
Hülkenberg and. Can't think of a funny way of saying Kevin Magnussen. Kevin
Magnussen. Yeah.
Maybe not the sort of spiteful yet acrimonious dynamic that we're maybe hoping from those drivers. Mm-hmm. Probably another disappointing year in terms of just again, not returning to the midfield or the front of the midfield. So, don't know. This is America's team. This is their sweetheart. You know, Haas is the prime king. And just sort of feel like they're hanging in there. I feel like they had their years where they came in and made a splash. Then they had their tough years and it became like, oh, is Gene Haas going to sell? I just feel like, especially if no other teams are allowed to join the grid, Haas would be top of my list for teams that want to exit.
Yeah. I would tend to agree that this is I'm just having a look at Kevin Magnussen and Hulkenberg's results here, and it makes for dire reading. You know, they both had the occasional like, oh, things kind of went well just at the, you know, because there were some other crashes, or not crashes, but you know, there's somebody else underperformed. I never think that it's because Haas are outperforming. I think it's because other people are underperforming. So
like a few points results, but just as many 17th, 18th, 19th. So
yeah, there's not a lot of they're not. I mean, you look at both the drivers, and they're not really sitting around the like 11, 12, 13 every race. It's, you know, first half of the year they were better. The first half of the first season, and then they both really, you know, kind of as soon as we got to Europe, the results have gotten worse. Definitely for Magnussen, and for Hulkenberg, they've kind of leveled out a little bit. The kind of
the other
15
teams
and
brought
up.
their upgrades, and they just went nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. Which is always the story with Haas. It feels like, you know, start okay. It looks okay. That looks all right, and then they stop spending any money. Yeah, and then they just don't have a development cycle. I mean, I think we're going to continue to see this as well. I think the bottom half of the table, of the point standing, is just all of those teams have just like, cool, time to start work on that 2024 car. This is junk, but there's no jeopardy about being dropped out of the grid or anything because we're guaranteed to be there, spend money on something else. You know, so it's not exactly spicy at the bottom of the grid. And I'm a little bit, but what can you expect? You know, Hulkenberg and Magnussen have had middling Formula One careers. This is exactly their level. They are performing at exactly where I expected them to be. These, you know, it took, you know, when was the last driver that you saw at one of these, you know, crappier, I'm going to use the word, you know, the lower end, you know, the back markers, outperforming their car or really giving standout performance? Like really, Charles Leclerc at Sauber was the last one I can think of.
Oh, going all that way back.
Russell at Williams?
Yeah, Gasly was in a rubbish car and got some results once.
Yeah.
But
Gasly was getting the tune out of that.
I guess Russell in the Williams, yeah.
Yeah. And those guys are moving on, but you can't look at, you know, this is our third team that we're talking about. Maybe Yuki could be doing a little bit better. You know, it could be pretty good at a better team in a better car. Don't need to talk about Daniel Ricciardo. We saw nothing from Nick de Vries that gave anybody any hope. But yeah, there's nothing from these drivers that you're like, wow, what an, like, just in the rain they've managed to pull out an 11th from back of the grid. There's just nothing that we're not seeing any of it. Maybe that's the rules and the regulations or the way these cars are built these days or anything like that. But just not really seeing anything from Hulkenberg and Magnussen. And we have never really seen anything. Like that one time for Magnussen coming second in Australia. And that turned out to be a pretty good car, but also it turned out to be a complete one-off for him. And so, yeah, I am caught. Yeah. I think that combine. I don't think you'd have a really great Formula One car even if you combine those two guys. And I really like them. But, yeah, it's... not for me.
I feel like they wanted Hulkenberg because they're like, let's just be sure that he's not actually secretly better. Like, I feel like they just wanted him as a yardstick to measure Magnussen against, but then they found, these guys they're basically brothers. They're like clones of each other.
Yeah, in 35 years, people are going to be like, wait, which one were you talking about? Hulkenberg or Magnussen? Because they're basically the same guy.
Were you the no podium guy or you were the short one? I was the no podium one.
Which one are you? The good hair? You both got pretty good hair. Okay.
I was the one with the good hair. At some point, actually, maybe in a video, on one of the video streams, we'll do like some of these graphics that F1 has been coming up with lately that are like most positions gained and, you know, all this stuff because they're genuinely hilarious and cooked, I reckon. But, yeah, Hulkenberg, just remind everybody, Hulkenberg, you still yet to get a podium.
He never will. Formula One won't allow it.
I'm ready to grade Haas.
Okay, you do it. Yeah, I've gone first both times.
I feel like if Alfa Romeo are a D, then I feel like Haas actually maybe a D minus, because they should actually probably be outperforming them by more than just 2 points ahead of Alfa Romeo.
Yep.
So they're a D minus for me as well.
I'm going to give them a D because I think that they are performing about where, with all of the tools that they have, this is I'm surprised they're not last. So I think they may be performing just a little bit over, just a smidge over maybe where they should be, through sheer
benefiting from the struggles of others.
Yeah, maybe Gunther Steiner's like sheer force of will. You know, just like he's pushing them up that hill, and the rest of his team, whose names I don't know. So
I'm sure there's others involved.
Yeah, I mean, if you walked in, you didn't know the brand of anything, you're like, so these are your resources and your two drivers, Magnussen and Hulkenberg. Where do you think you'd be? I'd be like, I would happily take third last in the constructors with some points, and it's like, yep, that's exactly where you are. So D.
Well, let's maybe look for some better news, I would argue, in Williams Mercedes, sitting on 11 points, equal with
Same
Haas
amount of
Ferrari.
points.
But
Yeah.
but
Why
I
are they so
think
much
just
better?
a more optimistic, positive story.
Yeah, why is that? It's funny because the numbers don't lie. Same amount of points as Haas, and yet we have this kind of somewhat upbeat or even glowing feeling about Williams. Right? Maybe it's just because I like Albon. I hope he has a full redemption arc to his career.
I think that this is the story of this team: is Albon really shining, Logan Sargent very much struggling, and it's hard to imagine him even sticking around next year, really becoming the new Nicholas Latifi of the grid, the guy who's also there but no one really knows. But, I mean, the disparity between this is the first team that we've had a real big disparity between the two drivers. Alexander Albon, all of the team's results, including 7th, which is how they're ahead of Haas, even though they're on points. But I think genuinely, driving actually pretty solidly, and when the pace is there, the pace is there. And also, they're powered by Mercedes, and when we get up to the top teams, you'll see that that engine's good, but they've clearly made steps forward with the car, with the aero package and all the rest of it, the kind of steps that they seemed so incapable of taking just 2 years ago. So this is, I think, positive signs. Obviously, they've got a long way to go to get right back up to the front of the grid, but these are the steps we wanted to see this team take for so long. I think that's part of why it's a positive story.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that Albon, he's a good driver. That might go against some of the other things I might have said about him, but I like him. I think he's a good driver. I think he's working hard to make his career work. I had that delightful interview and story about him the other day when he was talking about how he kind of got into Formula One and just got a call, and then it was and then he was in that afternoon. They were it went from getting a call from Helmut Marko being oh yeah, we think there might be some room to oh yeah, do you want the drive? And it's whoa, all right, great. And then to kind of be dropped unceremoniously, but to get to the senior team.
There's that too.
I mean, it's such a school of hard knocks for those Red Bull drivers. But it does harden them. The guys who do kind of make it, I think they can kind of make it under almost any circumstance if they manage to stay in Formula One. And I think he's just really happy to be in Formula One and takes all of that energy and effort. It's similar, I think, with Ocon. I think that there is just this no, I'm going to, put me in the worst team. I'm still going to make up for, try to bring as much of myself to that as possible. And maybe it's just because it's easier because we've seen his stories on Drive to Survive, and he's an English speaker, and so it's easy to understand those journeys. And I don't know some of those other drivers; they're probably doing exactly the same thing. It just sticks in the mind with Albon. And you look at his results; he's looking racy. I look at the races where he's performed well and the ones that he hasn't. 14th at Miami and Monaco; those are weird tracks. You're not going to overtake at Monaco. Miami's the car park, but very positive results at racy tracks like Azerbaijan. The first race of the year, Bahrain, gets a point, gets off to a great start, does really well in Canada. One of the, that's a real driver's track, right? That's a real, you have to be very good there to not crash, but to tease out a result. And that was really the turning point where we're oh fuck, they're so racy. They're quick. That car's real fast. And then to back it up in Austria with 11th, home soil essentially for him in with an 8th at Silverstone, and then 11th in Hungary and 14th in Belgium. That's a level of consistency now that he probably feels absolutely validated. That, okay, the car's on the way up. I'm going to prove that it can be, it really can fight for points every weekend. And so now it's just right on the edge of, he's right on that, like, if I just qualify a little bit better and I can hook up a good race weekend, I can get points. Like, he feels like probably master of his own destiny a little bit there too. Like a good enough platform in that car to continue to go and pick up points the rest of this season.
Yeah, I think
good.
He's in the mold of what Daniel Ricciardo is trying to sell to everybody, which is like, when points are up for grabs, I'll get out there and I'll scrap for them and I'll deliver the results. And it won't be, big points, but that's the point. Is week in, week out, when the points are up for grabs, I'll go and grab them. I feel like that's the narrative that Daniel Ricciardo wants for himself, except we're talking about Alexander Albon instead. Yeah. Like Nico Hulkenberg, he's also got fabulous hair, does Alexander Albon. Really hair game on point. So it's all good.
Blonde stuff is kind of cool. At least he's got a personality as well that I can identify. Like, he's kind of got this awkward but kind of self-confident, but he's a bit jokey, but he's also then when he's serious, I'm like, oh, look, he's using his serious voice. He's being serious.
The serious racer who has fun, the rest of the time, which, it's an archetype we like to engage with.
But yeah, there was a period there where it was just like, he probably won't be a Formula One driver for much longer. But now, he's kind of got that air about him that's like, you might just be in Formula One for another 10 years. You might actually, you could get, I think, I could see him at Aston Martin or something like that.
That's it. If a seat opens up at McLaren, if a seat opens up somehow at Aston Martin in another year or two, they might look at him. The Ocon might be on their list,
Well, I mean, it poses an interesting question, and they'll keep coming up. But this is completely out of the blue. But if he continues to put in good results, and let's say he puts in good results next season too, whether that's at Williams or somewhere else, and Red Bull are looking for a number 2 driver who's already been part of their system before, maybe you have a look at Albon and go, well, Max is just going to win every race, but here's Albon doing pretty well. Could we just stick him in that second driver spot? And I don't know if you'd want to go back there
Perhaps.
or not, but he's a good driver. On the other side of the garage, though, I know nothing about this man. He is, just
unimpressive and has not done very much.
Yeah, I mean, rookie season though, right? He's got an 11.
Sure.
At Silverstone. The car was good that weekend. But a lot of 20s. A lot of almost lasts.
I mean, of the drivers that have driven a whole season, he's last, yes. Just almost like just a clear last on the grid. That's despite being in the 7th team. So that tells a story, I think.
Yeah, the car's not bad now. Maybe, look, some drivers, this does happen though with cars a little bit further down the grid sometimes. One driver gets a tune out of them and the other driver doesn't. Sometimes you start to go, okay, let's bend the car development in the way of the guy who's going to get the performance out. And so you can't be too hard on a guy's first season in Formula One, but I'm going to be, because there's nowhere to hide now. I'd be expecting more because the other teams we've gone through are pretty crappy. So you should be able to... You're in Formula One for a reason.
I feel like actually, if you want to find something positive about him, I feel like there was, speaking of these weird Formula One graphics that they've been coming up with, I feel like I saw a stat along the lines of Logan Sargent has the most positions gained on the first lap.
Okay.
Something like that.
I could see that. So which
makes sense given that he starts last every race.
Yeah, exactly. Get past the guys who missed the lights going out quickly.
Yes.
And then drive around them. He's not crashing, not really. He's got 3 DNFs, but I can't remember them all because he's kind of...
That's right.
But more, finding his feet at that team. And maybe Williams have kind of finally gotten to the point where they're a supportive culture that, not to say they weren't before, but, they had a serious wobble, post kind of Bottas, where they just kind of lost their feel for everything.
Yeah.
And
here we go. I've got it here. First lap gains, season so far, Logan Sargent tops the list. 16 positions gained on the first lap. Yuki Tsunoda second with 13, then George Russell.
Very racy.
Out. So there you go.
Yeah. You got to get around Hulkenberg and Magnussen and, also around Bottas because he's like, what? Racing again? God, all right, quick. And so, but yeah. It's just, it's hard at the back of the grid because you don't really see these guys that much. So
it's true.
But I have no strong feelings about him. But I think that overall, I'm ready to grade Williams, and I'm going to give them I'm going to say Williams are getting a C from me.
Yeah.
Better than
I'm
expected.
on a C as well. Exactly. Not too good, but good signs.
Yeah, exactly. But I think they're probably happy with both their drivers. They're happy with the car development. They're doing exciting stuff. You know, they're getting nice little peaks in and amongst their plateau of they've lifted the floor and the ceiling, which I think shows a good trajectory. You never know where they're going to land on the week goes by.
That.
So, good on them.
In sixth position, Alpine Renault. This is where the big clear points gap is. They're more than 40 points clear of Williams. But they're a team alone because every other team has like a nearby team that they could maybe stretch for. But Alpine 57 points, Williams 11 points behind them, McLaren 103 points and on the charge ahead of them. So I don't think they're going to catch them. But Alpine, just sort of a few good results here and there. Obviously, podium in Monaco, pretty good. But I don't know. This sort of feels like another team that's sort of obviously lately had a bit of, what would you say, instability. And obviously had the recent instability of the drivers coming, going, announcing they're staying, then announcing they're going, announcing they were never going to stay. So that's been a weird year or two for them, but hanging it out there.
Yeah, it must. I often think about a team like Alpine where I'm like, I wonder, the underlying package is good. You've got two very talented drivers. Like, I don't think there's any denying that Gasly and Ocon are very good drivers that have had kind of mixed, difficult careers. Ocon's been dropped completely out of Formula One, had to kind of fight his way back, has been in a mix of teams. Gasly was always the bridesmaid in the Red Bull system. Has finally kind of struck it on his own and found a place that maybe suits him. And so they're they kind of, if there's such a thing in modern Formula One as the bad boys, I think they kind of are, those two. They're kind of like but they're genuinely very good. And you look at their results and you go, I cannot believe for basically what feels like probably 6 or 7 years now, if we were still doing F1 predictions, I think you would still be picking between Gasly and Ocon for 10th. Like, I cannot believe it, but their careers have basically been in that position their entire Formula One careers, that they are just 10th, both of them, forever. I know that Pierre Gasly has summited the mountains of Formula One when he's gotten lucky in the past, and Ocon this season, I'm just looking at his results now, that podium in Monaco. He led that race for a little while, didn't he? Like, did he qualify pole there or something? Something like that. God, my memory's bad for this season. It's just all Max Verstappen leads into the first corner, Max Verstappen wins. But I just, reflecting on it now, I find it so hilarious that these two perpetually 1 point every race guys are at the same team, essentially doing that this season, just finishing 8th to 12th every race. Yeah. Very consistently.
You take that one podium out and it's a lot more even.
Good on them, though. It's working.
Yeah.
And something for Alpine to build on. And if they can kind of get their acts together, which is what they're trying to do by moving, sporting directors around and trying to work out how the team will fit together and all that kind of stuff, I expect them to really improve. But to where?
I think you can only hope that the injection of cash that's come from the Hollywood backing, the extra investment that they'll get on as a result of that. Maybe they will be able to recruit better people as a result of that. They've got two good drivers that they could, if they wanted to, take care of and build something
keep them for 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a team that has the potential for taking strides forward yet again. The problem is all the off-track turmoil, you'd have to argue, is probably been causing a lot of instability and consternation. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, obviously, stable result, but you have to wonder what's going on in the headquarters. And a lot of that stuff, I mean, look, I know Formula One is a crazy old world, especially behind the scenes, but that's all self-inflicted stuff, right? This isn't competitors, reporting you to the FIA and protesting your car. It's not some rogue driver smashing into you in turn one. That stuff, the business stuff, the inner conflict, that's all self-inflicted stuff. So I've got no one to blame for all that stuff.
No, and Formula One's becoming way more stable as a sport, that you really should be able to stabilize your own team and sort that out and make a good push like there's never been a time in Formula One where it is, I think, more stable, which is that cost cap's there, development cycle's very clear, the rules are very clear, the like contracts and how, like, what races are going to be on the grid and who's in the kind of paddock. It's all kind of circled, like the wagons are circled now, and it's a very, like, you really only, everyone fishes in basically the same small pond for talent, and I don't just mean driver talent, I mean, you know, team principal talent, aerodynamicist talent. It's just one group of people and companies and sponsors that are all just there swapping, swapping houses every couple of seasons. So it's incredibly stable. And the future of F1 is very clear. So if they can, maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe they feel like, you know, they're just getting all their ducks in a row now, clear all that stuff up this season, and then go into 2024 with two solid drivers who have had solid seasons with a, you know, solid foundation for next season, and go and chase down McLaren. And are they be hoping to emulate what McLaren did this year? Probably next year.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I'm actually keen to give these guys as a grade a C, same as Williams, even though they're smashing Williams on points, because these guys are kind of treading water in terms of the results. Like I say, their problems are self-inflicted. Williams, on the other hand, yes, still way behind, but just doing everything right, making all the right moves and pushing forward. So C for Alpine as well. Where are you at?
Yeah, I would say I'm actually going to give them a C minus because they're a constructor. They have good investment, I think. They are, so it's kind of self-inflicted that they're not doing better. They have two very good drivers. So they should be doing a little bit better, especially when you look up the grid, and we're about to talk about McLaren. They've got a rookie, not a guy who's been in, Alpine have two guys who've been in Formula One for a long time now and have kind of seen a lot, and they are no longer like the rookie young guys. They're in their mid-20s, been driving in Formula One for ages. They're performing okay, but the team should be better. So if I was a teacher grading them, I expect more from you. So, you know, judging you against yourself and what I know you can do and what your potential is, it's a C minus. They should be up, like it should be more like McLaren and Renault are kind of on 70 points each, not have almost a 50-point difference.
Fair enough. Well, let's leave the bottom half there. Let's take a step into the top half. Top five. McLaren, Mercedes,
rarefied air,
Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris. We've sort of flirting with the whole driver market stuff. I usually try not to talk about it too much, not overly. But when the talk of that was reaching its fever pitch, Lando Norris's name kept coming up so many times. Like, Lando Norris must be desperate to get out of this garbage team. All of a sudden, they have a little bit of performance and they're like, yeah, Lando Norris, lock him in. I was like, well, yeah, he's already locked in for a long time, so that's all good. Oscar Piastri, I don't know that he's had a rocky start, but he certainly seems to have come good of late. So with the performance of the team, he hasn't taken any time. He hasn't needed any time to catch up to Lando Norris in delivering on the performance that they've been given in recent upgrades. So another team that's on the charge, but I feel like that's not just their overall position. They've actually changed throughout the year and evolved throughout the year, and things are looking good for this team. Yeah,
it's so funny looking at Lando Norris's, and same for Piastri, but Norris's results. You know, he's had a really rocky start to the season. Then he starts to kind of be in the points consistently with a couple of odd weekends that don't go well, and then bang, 4th, 2nd, 7th. Like, oh, okay, so you literally brought the upgrades to Austria and went, it's a new car now. And it really was. It was, no jokes, suddenly a completely new car. Like, they just found, if we just press this button, it goes really fast. You guys haven't been pressing the button? Christ, press the button.
So Lando Norris, first of all, Oscar Piastri, 34 points. Lando Norris, 69 points. So first of all, nice. But also, a bit of a points deficit here. But I feel like it's a bit illusory, because I'm not sure that Norris is driving twice as well as Piastri, you know?
No, I think that, all season long as well, they have brought the upgrades to Lando's car first, As you can see, they brought them to Lando's car in Austria, and he came fourth, but they didn't bring them to Oscar's car. So they brought him to Lando's car, but not Oscar's car, and Oscar finished 16th. I don't think you can tell the story of that in one race, but I think it is slightly emblematic of what's going on there. And now that they are, they've got similar cars, I would kind of expect Lando to be doing about this much better because he's got that much more experience in Formula One. So it's Oscar's first season, and I think he's outperforming expectations. But he just looks so unflustered that he's just like, he looks like he's been at McLaren longer than Lando has. He's making, I think his demeanor makes Lando Lando has always just kept this a bit like Daniel Ricciardo's forever the rookie, just getting out of here,
true.
Look at this. Whereas Oscar Piastri is I'm a serious racing driver. This is going to be my career.
Oscar is obviously Formula 3 champion, Formula 2 champion, Mark Webber in his corner. It's not surprising so much to me that he's unflustered in the way he presents himself, but unflustered behind the wheel. Maybe now it's time to get into the Spa incident, because I remember watching that and going, oh, that's all Sainz. That's all Sainz closing the door there. And then Sainz pointed out, I've driven a lot of races at Spa, and any guy who sticks his nose in there is always going to have the door closed on him. So that was a stupid move on Oscar's part. I also feel like Sainz said that, though, and if you watch the replay, Sainz is slamming on the brakes and cutting basically 45-degree angle across the track at that point. So it's he comes from a long way away. The same thing, bro.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's how I read it too. I was like, "Oh, Oscar, that's risky," and he'd be like, "Yeah, but if you don't do that, how are you going to make up positions?"
Yeah,
and then, but I also don't think he's even looking at Sainz. Sainz is almost on the other side of the track. It feels like Sainz comes a long way across to take the apex, and it was like, that's not how you drive on the first couple of corners at anywhere. Really, because someone else is not just he comes across two cars into Piastri.
Yeah, he did.
He doesn't. It's not like they were just neck and neck, and so that felt more. That kind of incident felt like the kind of incident that we haven't had for a long time. Like when I mean that Formula One just doesn't have as many crashes and stuff, I don't think that's happening as often as it used to. We're seeing better overtakes, as you said earlier. Spa had a couple of outstanding overtakes. Where you're like, that's not really a good overtaking spot, but the cars, because they can follow behind in air that's maybe not as turbulent. I think genuinely, I 100% agree with you. The overtakes are more often happening in unsuspecting places, which is really good. But yeah, I think that Oscar's got it all about him, but so does Lando. Every single time I find myself questioning Lando Norris's ability, he comes around and gets a podium. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah, you are just really, really, really good. He constantly performs well. I think that he's turning into a very mature driver who obviously McLaren really, really, really like and are backing him absolutely to the hilt. And if McLaren can continue on this trajectory to be, can you be a top 3 team consistently? They can hold on to both of them. I think that would be really good for McLaren to kind of have a stable lineup for the next couple of seasons.
Just for balance, I'll say something nice about Lando. Yeah, obviously very strong year, I think, so far. When the car performance has been there, he's obviously delivered and then some. But, he's gone from being the sort of fresh-faced kid full of just raw potential to, he's really grown into someone who can deliver across the whole race weekend, and he's good in the sprints as well, which is, I think, a good sign looking to the future of the sport. So, because we're probably going to have more sprints than fewer. But, experienced enough that the team don't need to worry about, well, what if we throw performance at this car, but then these guys aren't good enough to actually convert that into positions? These two now have proven, get that investment in, make those upgrades, because we will get you the results. Yeah. So really good signs here.
And also, obviously, I think that speaks to... You go, sorry.
No, I was going to say, one of the problems they've made for themselves is not a little bit anonymous for the first phase of this year, the first quarter. So the thing is, they've got the performance now to go and chase down maybe one or two teams ahead of them, but they've got a big gap to about 90 odd points that they've
big gap to close.
Got to pull back in, and if they can pull back in 100 points over the teams ahead of them, they'll be third in the championship, which would be great. There's still a lot of races to go, but I mean that's also a lot of points. So I don't know.
And the racing gets a bit tricky.
They might end up at the end of the year where they're neck and neck with Aston Martin, Ferrari, and McLaren, but that will be disappointing because they know that they probably could have done better.
Yeah, I think that the way their car is now, and other teams may be taking their foot off the pedal, the development pedal, as everyone is. I think they've arrived at just the right moment now to be like, yeah, there is no reason why we can't finish just behind Red Bull or be scrapping it out with Mercedes every single race. As long as we have good hooked up race weekends, there is 10 points plus for both drivers every single race for the next. So how many races have we got left? 11? So 10. Is that right? 10? You know, they get 20 points each every race, with the occasional one of them getting 15 or 18, you know. They could rake in a bunch more points. As long as they're pretty consistent. What I was going to say before is I think Lando's matured in a way as well, because maybe previously it might have been we might have had some spicy words possibly from Lando when Oscar comes in and performs basically in the same way, like just as well. Not just as well. That's unfair to Lando, but right on Lando's tail, and that they both get a big jump with the upgrades, and Lando can't necessarily point to himself being like, yeah, but look, I'm getting more out of this car. I think Oscar's like, it's my first year in Formula One. I'm performing pretty well
also finding
as well. Yeah, they're both driving pretty well, and the fact that it seems pretty harmonious and everything's all good, that's nice. Obviously, Lando's not threatened at all. Oscar doesn't feel like he has to go up against his garage mate. They've been pretty placid on track when one's been faster than the other. Oscar will be a bit like, all right, I'm a bit quicker, but Lando will say that too, but it's never like, get this ticket out of the way, let me past, which you do sometimes see in Ferrari, Leclerc. I'm sure Leclerc and Sainz are friends, but yeah, Leclerc's just like, come on, fucking hell, move him. So yeah, my grade for McLaren is a B, because I think they have hit upon something that is everything I like about Formula One. They're fast. They've got two drivers that I like, but are still a little bit edgy, that are driven, and they're taking it in the right direction. And I've really enjoyed watching them this season. So a B.
They're one of the teams that when someone that you know casually who isn't into Formula One just says, I'm going to watch the race this weekend, who should I be watching? You obviously say, well, Red Bull's going to win. But if you want a team to root for, I mean, for some reason, for the last 10 years, it's always been for me, McLaren and Williams. But McLaren, I'd have no hesitation telling someone who is like coming from Drive to Survive, maybe, like, I'm going to watch a race, who should I follow? I'd be like, eyes on McLaren. That's who you want. I'm also going to give them a B+. But I think they need to continue on. So that would be at risk, I would say. I would change my mind at the end of the year, for example, if they don't maintain or keep pushing. Not to say they've got to get podiums every week or anything, but they're in such a good spot, and it just seems to all be coming together for them. But if they drop it again, I would consider revising that score at the end of the year. Yep, I like it. So 4 to go, the aforementioned shit show of Ferrari. Sitting on 191 points, just behind Aston Martin, but I feel like that says a lot about where Ferrari's at for me.
How can that be the case? Like,
how do they keep doing way better than this?
How can they keep coming? Like, it's like, you know what? Maybe this season they'll challenge Red Bull. Like, I feel so disappointed in a team that has all the resources, has all of the brand, has two really good drivers, and it's just, from the outside looking in, you can read the script for them every race weekend. Somehow, qualifying's okay. Leclerc will qualify second. You're like, okay, so the car's pacey, looks good. All right, come on. But there's always something. There's always some tire mix-up, strategy bad call, a crash, like a little racing incident. Like, between the two of them, there's always something that they cannot have a clean racing weekend. It just seems impossible. You know, like if you've given them the jump that McLaren has had, the one thing that McLaren's been able to do is just have some very nice, clean race weekends with that performance jump. And Ferrari, you wouldn't even know because they're just every weekend there's something. And I don't know how they managed to do it. You know, and they've been trying to change it, right? You know, they've changed team principals, they've changed development teams, they've changed the guys in the garage around a little bit more. And they've tried to get two really good drivers who are pretty experienced, you know, who can give good feedback, all that kind of stuff. And yet, they seem to be standing still. It boggles my mind. Like, why do you think that is? What do you think they're doing wrong?
I don't know if it's just the heritage of Ferrari. I mean, this is like an obvious basic bitch answer, and I feel like anybody talking about Ferrari when they're struggling at any point in their career would be like, well, for their Ferrari, they just expect results and they just expect to win. They just you know, hope to manifest it, and then it just doesn't happen. For a while, we could point to the car and say like, well, you guys are, you know, you've got like that low drag, powerful engine. You've got it fundamentally, philosophically wrong because everyone else is, you know, going for that speed in the corners. You're trying to overtake everyone on the straight and you're slow in the corners. You've just got it completely backwards. I feel like they've addressed that. But now it feels like the car is, you know, just an average kind of car, not a dud, but also not a rocket. And then all we're really seeing is the times when Carlito is faster than Leclerc. And he says, I'm faster. Can you let me pass? And the team says no. And it just feels like there's no good reason for it. So that suggests to me that there's something behind the scenes that's just rotten. And they, for whatever reason, like you say, they've cycled through team principles. They've had, I mean, these two drivers are relatively new in the grand scheme of things. Leclerc's been there for a while, but I mean, these two should be settling in to their roles now, and they seem worse than ever. So there just seems to be something like a cancer in the team that they just can't get rid of.
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly weird, you know, looking through their consistency. So I would say that Sainz is like Mr. Consistent, right? You know, he had finished every single race until Spa, and that, you know, half his fault maybe. But you just run through his results, and on a normal race weekend, his average position is probably sixth, like fifth or sixth, which fair. Is not good enough from Ferrari, but he's always there. Like, he's putting together rock solid race weekends, like a great floor to build from. Like, if he is giving you a B+ every single weekend, you're like, great. All we need to do now is build on that, slowly improve the car, get better at understanding how he likes to race, and we should be able to finish on the podium more consistently. But you then look across the garage and you go to Charles Leclerc and you go like, okay, here's a guy who probably has a better ceiling as a driver, who can really turn it on. If it goes for him the right way, he's the one who gets the podiums. You know, Azerbaijan, third, second in Austria, you know, third at Spa. You know, like they're both capable of a podium, but I feel like Leclerc's results as a driver and his driver history is like when he hooks it up on a weekend and is singing and he is in the zone, I think he's probably the third best driver on the grid, in my opinion. But when it doesn't go well, nothing works. You know, then you look at the rest of his results and they're like 9, 11, quite a few 7s thrown in there where you're like, oh man, like he just can't make it. Like, you know, someone like Fernando Alonso is always performing 2 positions better than his car. Like, just can't, or one position. Like, we'll scrape everything out. There is nothing left in that ice cream bowl after Alonso's had a go in it, right? You know, he's licked the entire thing. Where I feel like Charles Leclerc is a little bit more temperamental in that it's like, okay, this thing's not right. It's affecting the way I'm racing. It hasn't. I mean, Daniel Ricciardo kind of had this too, I think, towards the end of his run at McLaren. It's just like on the perfect day and it was all perfectly hooked up, it worked. But if it was one slight thing that wasn't quite right, he needed the best conditions in order to perform. And I think that Charles Leclerc is in that position now too. And so he's more the poster boy for Ferrari than Sainz is. And I think he's the one who's more likely to win a race. But Sainz is the guy who's going to give you just absolute consistency all the time. But that's nothing like Ferrari should be, right? There's just a real lack of. Is it aspiration, maybe? Like, is it just that it seems, I don't know, I get this weird feeling like it just doesn't matter to them. It's just like that they're not perturbed by it. They're like, well, we'll give it again. We'll see if we're going to do the same things next week and see if it's any different.
I don't know, and I feel like you're sort of right to talk about Leclerc and how he gets the jitters, and I feel like perhaps what they're trying to do is to avoid him getting the jitters too much by wrapping him in cotton wool, which obviously is not great if your name rhymes with colour signs. So I feel like they're almost going into every race with like the worst scenario in mind, or the middling scenario in mind, and they're not great with the strategy, but they're also never the ones to take a big gamble either. So they're kind of like you say, just sort of middle of the road.
Yeah,
but the problem is, this is for any other team, we wouldn't be calling that out. But this is Ferrari. They're meant to be the Formula One is in their DNA, right?
They're synonymous with the sport. When people think of Formula One, they think of the red car. But I wonder if that's actually changing. I wonder.
For me, it hasn't been true forever.
Yeah, and so I wonder, is Oscar Piastri thinking about the Ferrari drive, or is he thinking about the Red Bull or Mercedes drive?
For sure.
Or is he like,
now,
what? Maybe McLaren's a better spot to be right now. I don't know if anybody's thinking of the Aston Martin drive. Maybe they should, but
I feel like it's gone from every driver wanting to drive for Ferrari and win a championship to every driver being like, well, if I'm never going to win a championship, but I can drive for 2 years at Ferrari, that'll be good enough.
That'd be nice.
And I feel like now drivers are like, well, yeah. I mean, like Lewis, maybe I'll go and drive for Ferrari for 1 year and then retire just so I can say I did it and it'd be nice to do it. But I feel like they're all like, actually, if that doesn't happen, I actually don't even mind anymore. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, do I actually need that chaos in my life? I think that's like Sebastian Vettel, I think, was a bit like, oh my God. Like, I tried really hard for a couple of years to dig this team out of this. I thought it was going to be the kind of fairy tale thing, but even I couldn't do it. And it forced like a complete change in his entire dynamic. He had kids. He became this like Formula One hippie. It was great. I was we're all here for it. It was good for he had like kind of a redemption arc at Ferrari where the hard edges of his thing, like he became like water. He was just like, you know what? I'm no longer going to be fire and ice. I'm just going to be, like a lake without waves. I'm just going to move with the whole vibe of it, and it's all good, man. And so
I remember him trying it on a few times at Ferrari.
Yeah, but I think he got out of it. I think he got out. I think he just, it wore him down. Like there was just no level of like, I can be the most consistent, open, best like guy for this team. And he almost got there, right? But if you're Lewis Hamilton, do you want the drama of going to Ferrari and having just a very frustrating last season in the limelight of the Tifosi? That's what I'm talking about. Is if you're Lewis Hamilton going, do I want to drive a prestige year at Ferrari for 1 year just to do it? I mean, the problem is he's driven for the prestige team. Like Mercedes was the prestige team. It probably still is. Yeah, like he did it. Yeah, I'd rather be driving around in the Mercedes.
How can I get into that Mercedes for 1 year?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. How I would rather be coming second, third, or fourth in the Mercedes than I would be in the Ferrari at this point, because at least I know. Yeah. You
ready to rate this team?
Yeah, I'm ready. Ferrari.
My grade starts with a D and ends with a D. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I would say E. I think they're worse than that. I think that they are really what if you took away the two drivers that they've got, who I think are actually excellent drivers, and put in two crappier drivers, they would be obviously way worse. And I think that if they weren't, they attract a lot of good talent, and that's the worst thing about it, is that they should be way better than they actually are, and they have no excuse. And there is no way that they should be letting Mercedes off the hook after a bad last year and a bad start to this year, and that Aston Martin should be better than them. Like, it's a joke. It really is. I'm so glad that I don't like love any one Formula One team, and especially glad that it's not Ferrari, because I would just be. And I think that that's where Charles Leclerc is. I think he loves that team, and I think he loves the romance of it, and that's why he's upset all the time, because he's just like, oh, why is it like this? Why is my dream like this? It's like in the Disney World of finding out that it's a centre for ants and all the rides are tiny and that it just it doesn't work in the rain, and like, it would just be the worst. So yeah. And it's my harshest grade, and it will be my harshest grade. I mean, not F for Ferrari, but yeah, it's as near as they are. They're not on the right trajectory, and they haven't been for years. So
the thing is, if you would ask me, where do you think Ferrari will finish next year, better or worse than this year, I'd be like, probably worse, because they're headed, they're not headed in a good direction. Anyway, let's leave them behind and move on to the top three. Some more.
Yeah.
Position number 3, Aston Martin, Aramco, Mercedes, with their drivers Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll.
2 of our favourite drivers.
Again, one of the other positive stories of the year, I think. 100%. Obviously, seeing Fernando Alonso on the podium so much at the start of the year was real good. But I feel like lately, the latest round of upgrades they've been caught wrong-footed or something. Mm-hmm. And they suddenly just don't look so hot as they were a month ago. Yeah. So the question is, can they get it back?
I reckon with all the cash that they've got and all the skills and ability, yes. I think they're starting to perform to what I would expect from their resources, I suppose, if that makes sense. Although Lance Stroll in their resources, he's not a bad Formula 1 driver. At this point, we know this, he's fine. But when you look down his results, and I think the car's doing a lot of work for him, I think he's a back marker driver, but he's not a Formula 1 driver, if that makes sense. But he's not giving them much.
I think if you were Fernando Alonso and you see Ferrari are within single digits of points behind you, you would feel pretty good that the guy writing the checks is going to maybe write 1 or 2 extra to make sure that you hold on to that third position in that car, which augurs well for them to at least maintain their current performance, if not take another step.
Yeah, there'll be a couple more podiums in their season. Assume a Fernando Alonso third on the podium in Singapore kind of scenario, I would say. But yeah, he's outperforming the car, I think, a little bit, and Lance, I think, is underperforming the car a little bit. So if you could only put like Gasly and Ocon in that car, I think they would be, funnily enough, probably in exactly the same position. It's just that they've got one world-class, world champion driver and some other guy who's fine. So, but not bad. This is what I mean. I think Lance Stroll has been in Formula 1 now for a long enough time that it's like, you're okay, actually. You're fine. So, they signify everything about where Formula 1 is going, though, right? More American, more Saudi money, more...
Yeah, good and bad, yeah. That's right.
Have more of the Formula 1 product. And that's why Fernando's there. He's a franchise player. It's just... There's just almost no personality about their team at all. Maybe other than Fernando Alonso a little bit. So I'm not rooting for them, but I'm glad that someone is there that's kind of pushing another... It's like a little bit similar to Red Bull, but without the flashiness and without the kind of interesting story. Sure. It's just kind of like, look at what financial might and good business sense does. See what you can achieve when you have like some good management and kind of a ruthlessness about building a very good team and making some smart decisions whilst also carrying your son. That's kind of amazing. So,
yeah. I mean, I know you just pumped up his tires and you were like, he's not a bad driver and stuff. Like, I get all that. Fernando Alonso, 149 points. Lance Stroll, 47 points. Not 147, 47. So he needs to lift, and the team need to do whatever they need to do to help him, because that is how they're going to stay ahead of Ferrari, is by getting more results, more points
out of
Stroll. They need to do that.
Because if Ferrari can just continually finish 5th and 6th every race, then they're in trouble.
It's hard.
They'll reel
them in. It's hard. Like, Fernando can't do everything.
And look, really, McLaren will probably eat into a lot more of those points in the second half of the season.
They will. That's the thing. That's one of the points that I was going to make about Aston Martin in particular, is that it's all well and good to think about like how many points you're going to get from a weekend when there's, second and third up for grabs. But when you've got 2 Red Bulls, 2 Mercedes, maybe 2 McLarens, all of a sudden...
And a Williams.
The next best car.
And Albon Williams running around.
Those points are getting real small, exactly. Yeah. So... whatever they're going to do,
6 points per race.
Got to do it real soon.
Not 30 points per race. No, it's not 30 points. But yeah, it is kind of like that. Yeah, 100%. So, yeah. you're right. It's time to get Lance Stroll out of that car and put someone good in it. Someone who's good but not bad. All right, so I'm going to give them. What are you going to give them? You go.
I was just going to say one last point. It was like I think I saw a graph recently, like where the teams were last year compared to where they are now this time of the year, and this team had made the most gains in terms of positions, like 6 positions. So I mean, we have to remember this was the team that when it was announced Fernando Alonso's going there, it's like, you said you weren't coming back unless you were coming back into a car that was going to win podiums. All of a sudden, he shows up and gets like 5 on the trot. So a big surprise. Obviously thrilled for them. Good for the sport. Good for them. But they just need to keep pushing. The thing for me, it would be a good score, and obviously it should be a good score. They're number 3 and come from out of nowhere, really. But I feel like it's a B-, minus being Stroll. If they could get more...
The minus is Stroll.
Get more
could have been a B+
Stroll would be higher.
with a better driver.
That's it.
Yeah. Who would you put in
Maybe
there?
an A-. Who
would you put in that driver slot then?
If I could have anyone from the current grid?
Yeah.
Oh, Nick De Vries is free.
Nick De Vries.
That's the thing. It's not going to be anyone else. It's going to be Stroll, right?
No, of course. But I'm just... Hey, it's our show. We can kind of do what we like here. But, obviously not... put Max Verstappen in the car. He probably would win races if it was him. Or Hamilton. But take those guys out. But should they be looking at someone like Charles Leclerc? Should they be looking at Daniel Ricciardo? Should they be looking at...
I don't think they'll have Charles Leclerc to partner Alonso. But if Alonso leaves, sure. They would be very happy with him. And he'd be a good fit for them too, I think.
Yeah. But if they did get rid of Stroll, you could pick...
Perez.
Yeah, Perez.
Pick up Perez.
That might actually happen. Good money.
Don't even know my own powers.
Yeah. Right,
next year when that's announced. Oof.
Okay. Mercedes. Very odd. Like it's seemingly fumbling their way through this season. It feels like every weekend is like ripping off another Band-Aid very slowly. And they're just
kind of summed up from that recent weekend where Lewis Hamilton qualified really badly and said, "This is the worst car I've ever driven," and then finishes on the podium, and they're like, "Good car, yeah, good car."
Stop saying it's bad on the radio.
That's their season. Yes, that's their season wrapped up in one weekend. Hot and cold, running hot and cold. We've had different. We'll get to Red Bull next, but we've had different mini eras within this season where it's been like Red Bull winning, but they're threatened by, Aston Martin, or they're threatened by Mercedes. Or for one race, suddenly Ferrari's there. Or now they're threatened by McLaren. But Mercedes looked like they were nowhere, suddenly somewhere. I think they're all confused. They got personality disorder.
Yep. I think it's for both of Russell and Hamilton more so, but can really get a tune out of the car when it's not great. But I think Mercedes' version of not great this season is much better than last season's not great. I think they've been fucking around trying to work out what's going to work. I think they've finally landed on something that's pretty good. I think they've been lucky that some of the other teams just aren't good enough, that Ferrari hasn't, Ferrari's an E, and that Aston hasn't necessarily been able to carry it forward that much, and the McLaren was a little later on their development. So Mercedes not fallen into second by default, but has kind of, with their might and development resources, to essentially change direction fully on their car, I think twice, or 1.5 times. Not many teams can do that. Not many teams can afford to do that, have the resources to pull it off, to have the drivers who are good enough to kind of every week turn up and be like, what car are we going to get today, guys? And make it work. So, yeah, I think they're lucky, but they've got all the resources to be lucky, so they keep putting themselves in the right spot. And you're running down Hamilton's results, it really doesn't look like a bad season. I feel like every weekend I was like, where's Hamilton? He's down in 7th. And then he's like, he's finished 2nd. Maybe that speaks to Perez a little bit. But, yeah, other than the 8th in Austria, the lowest he finished is 6th a couple of times, and the rest of the time, 5, like, 2nd, 3rd.
Even if he's off the podium, still threatening and consistently, which is classic Lewis.
Finished every race.
There's that.
He's getting everything out of that car. I think that he's picking... This is where Hamilton is excellent for this. The World Championship winning last decade from Lewis Hamilton, he has become this driver who knows exactly when to push and when to not. Like, the hammer time thing is not a joke. He knows exactly when it's like, this is the moment, go. Like, I'll overtake this guy. Or his in-laps and out-laps are great. He's the first name on the team sheet. Like, he's the driver that I would put in my team immediately because he just gives you so much. And I think that he sets an excellent example for Russell because I think Russell is in exactly the same mold. Maybe not as gifted. And I think Lewis Hamilton has earned his giftedness. I think he's earned his skill set the entire time. He's worked incredibly hard to be a better driver every single year. It just doesn't necessarily come across that way in his personality, but I think he's so driven, as similarly as Max Verstappen still. But I think Russell's exactly the same. I think Russell is desperate to be a world champion as well and knows he really has it in him. And even though he's tall and doesn't have much of a personality, he's going to work really hard at it. And he also gets as much as possible out of every single race weekend. He just needs maybe some of his hard edges. He still, every now and again, makes a decision. You're kind of like, oh, did you have to do that? Was that like? Did you really need to take that risk at this point in the race where you could have just brought it home? I think he's doing better at that. But Lewis hasn't made those kinds of mistakes in years. He just never does that. But all of that being said, they're only a B from me because there's no reason why they should be making the kinds of... And look, I know the Red Bull car is just immense, but Mercedes could be closer than they are. Like there is no way that they're sitting, that they are comfortable at all looking at this and being like, wow, we are half the points of Red Bull. We haven't really looked like winning a race. And so there's no... like they haven't been able to sort out this formula at all, and there's really no excuse by halfway through the second season of this formula that they still don't look that much better. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's more consistency in the car for sure. I think Hamilton's still driving the wheels off the thing like he always does. I think that Mercedes, you could almost lock them in for second in the constructors. Hamilton is behind Fernando by 1 point in the drivers, but I would put everything I've got on Hamilton finishing third for the drivers ahead of Alonso, and there's no one that's going to catch him really. So, given the year, we'll get to Red Bull next, but given the dominance of them, to be second in the constructors, third in the drivers, sort of can't ask for too much more. Yep, they have also made a big change in terms of the side pods, which they were sort of famously getting dragged for by just about everybody, even people who knew nothing about aerodynamics, going, what are you got no side pods for? That's junk. You got to get rid of that. And they were like, it's not that easy. But and then Red Bull were like,
actually, that's not a bad idea. let's have no side pods. Like,
everybody's sort of met in the middle, like, let's make our big side pods smaller, or people who didn't have them will put little small ones on. So all the cars are starting to look more or less the same. But I think it's something that they needed to improve. They have improved on that. I feel like that's the sign of a team that does what they need to do to win. So look, I think that's a good sign. I'd like to see maybe Russell get one or two more good results because there's a bit of a points gap, but we know that Russell's still blossoming into the great driver that I'm sure he will be. I think that this team for me is at a B+. Again, it's the side pod change and the making that change that needed to be made for me that separates the B from B+. But I'll give them a B+, and I'm sure they will charge home for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that even when they say they're looking at, they're not doing that much development on this car. You're like, but they will go into every weekend being like, how can we fucking win this race?
Yeah, I don't think they're ever not developing.
Speaking of winning races,
so last Red Bull Racing Honda RBPT. So, I don't even know what you say about this team. They're setting records for the most consecutive wins. They're not only set the record for the most consecutive wins on the trot, they've won something like 21 of the last 22 races. Max Verstappen in particular, incredible form. Won every race or finished second when he didn't win. Sergio Perez off in the wilderness at times, and they bring Daniel Ricciardo back in, and they're like, see, and then all of a sudden his performance lifts. Bit of a coincidence, maybe. But, it got the result that they wanted, you could argue. But, Red Bull, there's no other word than sort of sterling, bulletproof, Max Verstappen.
Excellence.
I know he might not be not popular with me, but doing everything right. So...
Yeah, I think Max is making the car is getting the absolute maximum out of that car. Pardon the pun, but
sure, I'll allow it.
Like it is. It's like watching when I was in Japan this year, my final night in Tokyo, watching a sushi master wielding a beautiful long knife to perfectly cut beautiful. Like it's just poetry. Like he's just so good, and it all works so perfectly. Him and the car and the team are just one unit now. That even when he's not qualifying first, he just gets so much out of the car. He knows it like the back of his hand. It really does remind me of Vettel in his pomp at Red Bull as well, where I'll never forget those comparisons where he was taking, where was it? I can't remember. That he was taking corners at full throttle where other teams would have to lift. Like just the control, the speed, even when it doesn't seem like he's having the best weekend, he still pulls something out. They've got their strategy down. Maybe strategy's easy when you're just like, oh, we got Max Verstappen and the best car. So we know he can make those overtakes. But he still does. He still makes them. This isn't a guy who's just like getting it done on undercuts and overcuts. He makes the moves when he has to. And he's become so good at avoiding drama. Like he just does not get involved. He's not qualifying
that he's improved,
first every weekend.
You'd say?
Yeah. 100%.
Like Lewis Hamilton, when you hear Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton has improved their driving somehow, it's scary. If I was another driver, I would be scared to hear that. But it's true.
No, he came into that Red Bull team as he was always going to win a world championship. But
that's what I was going to say is like 5 years ago when we were talking about Daniel Ricciardo leaving because Red Bull were building a team around Max Verstappen, he knew that kind of this was very likely where they were headed. Red Bull, you can say what you like about them, but they've had this vision for years and years and years. They've invested in it. They've worked towards it, and they're reaping the rewards now. But they knew that this was a possibility, that they would return to the top of the grid with a great car, but they would have the driver in waiting, ready to mop the floor with everybody. And this is exactly what they've delivered. So, and I made a video a while ago on the live stream where I was talking about how there's this sort of doom narrative now. It'd be like Red Bull are too good, as if like, well, we have to change. We've got to pull everyone back in because this is so bad. People are switching off. Credit where it's due to David Croft recently for saying something along the lines of, look, Formula One is a majestic sport. It's a spectacle. If you can't get any pleasure out of it, then I don't know what to tell you. Something like that. Along the lines of like, why would anyone tune in to watch Max Verstappen lap the whole grid? But, I mean, again, that's just to say little button there. Credit where it's due. He said that. But the thing that has come up for me now with Red Bull, and this is kind of a perverse thing, which is like they've won 12 races in a row now. They're only 10 more races away from the clean sweep of the grid. As boring as it is, I kind of want to see him do it now.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm kind of in their corner for this. It's so weird.
It is very weird, but
I want to see the 100%. There is a certain glamour to that because there's nothing. I don't know. There's something quite satisfying in when you know intellectually something is possible, but it seems impossible purely because of the amount of circumstances that need to be that need to click together to make it happen. That they haven't had well, you know what? Leclerc just got really angry, just drove into the side of Max Verstappen, and Perez might have qualified badly and still finished as full. They just haven't had that. Like, it's so crazy to me. And I think it takes these very specific set of circumstances, which is that they have the best car, they got the best driver. Formula One has become a more conservative racing grid of drivers who want to finish, who want to perform well. There's kind of a new sense of, I wasn't going to say safety, but as much as like relatively clean racing. I think that it's all of these things combined have given Red Bull the opportunity to go on clean sweep this season. But I also don't think, I mean, you can look at Max Verstappen's points. He's got 314 points. That is more than Mercedes combined. They don't need Sergio Perez, genuinely. And all the times that when Max has finished second, it's because Sergio's finished first. So if you take Perez out of there, maybe Max would have finished first. So I wonder if they would ever even entertain the possibility of just being like, we're just going to run one guy, like pull all the entire. That's such an interesting thought experiment to me. Pull all the resources of the team, just have one guy, and can he win every single race? and get the fastest. So how many points would that be? That'd be, if you did 26 points for the 22 races this season, 572 points. Plus the sprint points. So how many of this? You get 10 for a win there?
It's 15 or
and
something.
There's 3 of them,
there.
right?
Yeah.
So you're looking at 600 points for one guy. I mean, madness. But I suppose Perez has been taking up some points for some of the races where other teams could have come second and got those 18 points. But even then, it's only one guy. Like, he's surplus to requirements, except that I suppose they use all his data to improve Max's car. Send Perez out on the harder tire, see what performance we can get out of it. All right, should we pull Max in now? Like, it's just, he's the perfect foil. And so all of that kind of combined starts to just have its own level of like very fierce, hard romance to it, I suppose, of perfection and seeking Formula One perfection, which is kind of nice. It is a little bit boring from a racing perspective because we don't see Max do a huge amount of racing, even though I did say earlier that he does make his overtakes. But as soon as he gets in front, it's gone. Like, it is absolutely done. He's just so fast.
That race at Spa where he qualified low in the grid, and it was like, I feel like he qualified low in the grid last year at Spa as well for points.
If only he was a better qualifier, funnily enough.
Yeah, that's probably true.
There are other guys who I think are better over one lap than him.
Sure, but it was just obvious that he had the car and he is who he is, and he was going to be leading within the first sort of 10 laps, and that was pretty much what happened. So, but I feel like it's the drives like that that are number one, where the excitement comes from if you're watching Max. But number two, those kind of results just underline the dominance and performance and all the rest of it. I feel like, part of me wants to be like, what's the controversial, what's the rating for this team that would get everybody talking? But I feel like there's really only two options. Number one, you give the team an A+, or number two, you refuse to rate the team because they're just on such a different level, no grade, ungraded.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Ungraded. Yeah, you. We think you're cheating on the exam. Like, your results are too good.
If we were rating different years, that might be relevant. But I haven't heard anything this year suggesting they're cheating. But I don't know.
They've got less time in the wind tunnel. Maybe
less time in the wind tunnel means, and they're still delivering this. So,
yeah, thank God they didn't get more time in that cheeky wind tunnel. And he's still got time to do live streams and stuff. And I like Max more than I've ever liked him recently. I think that maybe that's because winning is, you can be pretty happy when you're winning.
Well,
it's all clicked together.
The arrogance has the edge taken off it when you're winning everything, because you're also backing it up. If you were super arrogant and also not winning, then that's not good. But
he no longer feels like I think he's grown past the but I deserve this. And this is number 3 as well, so it's also like it wasn't a fluke one time, No, exactly.
You could be tempted to downgrade the team for the Perez performance. I feel like though that's actually mostly.
But is that on purpose?
You'd have to say.
I think that's by choice, though. I think they have Perez because it suits them. They could have anyone.
Yeah,
they could literally have any driver they want, and they choose him because he is perfect for it. I don't think him and Max have no relationship because they don't need one. Perez knows his role. He has to say that he wants to win more race stuff because it would be weird if you didn't. But I think he does it better than Bottas does, because Bottas was always a bit angry about how he was being treated. And I don't think Perez is constantly searching for respect from the team. I think it's very clear what his job is. And they are like, hey, thank you. You're going to win races sometimes, which is nice for you, right? Because you're not really a guy who would be expected to win races. And you get this great life.
The argument that you can make the argument that that's what he's paid to be there for, but he's about to get paid a little bit less apparently because Max is so far ahead of him in points. There's a clause that they're like, if you're so far behind, we can pay you less. So,
which makes sense. Yikes. There's too many times he's finished 6th. You're like, but Max won the race by half a lap. How are you 6th? It's just because, you're not as good. You're just not as good of a driver. But if he was better, that if they put George Russell in that car, that might be a bit problematic for them. There's a guy who might actually try to go for the win more often. And maybe those days where Perez just finishes 4th, it's like, but he brought the car home. There's some cost saved. Didn't crash into anyone. No controversy. Just live a quiet Red Bull life.
They've clearly engineered the car around Max's driving style, his strengths, but they're so far ahead. You'd have to say, like, why aren't they putting a little bit of extra, turns of the dial in Perez's favour? But
yeah,
I don't know why.
I'd love to see them just tell that to Perez, and it's like, hey, we're going to dump all this, effort into you now. But Max would never want him to win more races, but it'd be more like, we want you to finish second every single race. So take the risks. We're going to try to give you good strategy. We're not going to use you as the Max foil as much. Like, we want you to, we're really going to put it into you to be, because it turns out we don't need to give Max too much anymore. Like, as long as we give him the fast car and he is himself and we have pit stops that are under 3 seconds and don't fuck anything up really badly, he has no one to crash into, because by lap 3, he's already 5 seconds down the road. So it's very easy. So it's an A plus from me, because I think they have played it perfectly, absolutely perfectly.
You could nitpick, but I mean, any grade other than an A plus, I just think is not. Really
and they're not
valid.
the constructor. That's the other thing. Yeah. They're still Honda. Like, they've still got to deal with all the other stuff, and they just do everything that Ferrari doesn't do. Like, it's. I know it kind of boggles my mind, but it's. They are this perfect mix of, like, they've got some of the most... They've got Adrian Newey and other people in that team. I should know those other people's names. They've got great race strategists. They just do everything in a really metronomic way that Mercedes tries to do. But they've also got Max Verstappen. And they've also got this weird complex about being the underdog, even though they've been the dominant force in Formula One in the modern era. I don't think they can carry that, like, but we're not Mercedes or Ferrari, so, we're always scrapping and battling, and we're always finding it hard in Formula One to, get a voice. It's like, shut up, Christian. Like, you are the guy, and you are the team. But, that's still 1% true, though, that they aren't Mercedes or Ferrari. So they do have that little bit of extra to kind of fight on. And they're a marketing team for an energy drink. I mean, come on. How is this even possible? And so, Aston Martin must be cribbing notes from their playbook, right? About being like, how do we do that? We should be able to do that too. And I think they're copying it pretty well. So they just need to... How will they find the next Max Verstappen before Red Bull does, is what's interesting to me.
Well, look,
so A+.
I mean, I think we've been talking for a long-ass time. I'm also A+. I feel like... I don't know that there's any gradings there that are too, like, controversial or will set tongues wagging, but if anybody in the Discord or on Threads wants to add us to say, you got it completely wrong about McLaren, or how dare you give A+ to Red Bull or whatever, let us know, shout out. We're all over the place at the moment. We are on the web, unbelievably. We have a website, superlicense.fm. Zach, the FM stands for?
Formula Mates.
Formula Mates. We're a couple of Formula Mates.
Yeah.
We're on the threads, as previously mentioned, and you also want to get to the Discord. All the links to all of that have been updated, and they're now on the website, on the Formula Mates website. So go and check that out. Come and say hello in the Discord. We might even reinstate on the Discord doing the cheeky little predictions. I feel like that's...
I just need to get in there,
just something we should maybe just start
we've both been pretty
busy.
Back into. I need to re-engage. I don't know, it's been funny. Yeah. I always find this part of the year a bit funny with the sport as well, because just as I'm kind of like, we get into the really fun races, but then also it's sunny or somewhat sunny summer, and
sunny.
Like it's, and then you suddenly like right, I'm kind of ready to be in, and then Formula One's like, we're actually going to have a quick break, and you're like, actually though, would have been really good to have that break a little while ago when all the other sport was like absolutely peaking, and now, anyway. We got other things to distract us. We've got to watch the Tillies into the semi-finals.
Oh, yeah. Go Tillies.
Go Tillies.
It's coming home, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't watched any games yet, but I'll try and catch the next one or two.
Yeah.
I was also going to say, one last thing about us, self-promotion-wise. The best-kept secret on YouTube at the moment is the Super License YouTube site, which has been going great guns, doing live streams 1 hour before the race. I just noticed that the next Grand Prix is the Dutch Grand Prix, and that's it. Standard European race time.
Who will win that.
1 hour before that, there will be a live stream, and from that should be some choice highlight cuts. If you don't happen to catch the live stream, you can always catch up on the best bits afterwards. So thanks to everyone that's been watching them. It's been going really well. But please chuck it a subscribe and make sure we crowd your YouTube recommendations.
I'm going to be in Berlin that weekend. I reckon I'll find some time to watch that race. bank holiday weekend.
Lovely.
Yeah, Zenvort.
Well, I was going to say, next podcast probably won't be after the next Grand Prix, but probably after, I'm not sure how the calendar looks, but after not the Dutch Grand Prix, but the Italian Grand Prix. Another good one to check in after that one.
Monza.
Maybe we'll be back.
Yeah,
as well.
we can check in by then. Yeah, we can check in.
Yeah,
let's
we'll
do
work that
that.
out.
So
Somewhere around there.
an early September podcast, I reckon. That'll suit.
Yeah, very
because
nice.
got
Back on the pod in another 3-4 weeks or so. But until then, enjoy the racing. Do tell us if you disagree or strongly agree with any of our ratings. That would be interesting to hear.
If you know anybody in
We'll be
those
back
teams,
with
don't tell them our ratings.
No, please don't, unless they're good.
Yeah.
We'll be back with another pod soon, back on the live streams very sooner. And then until then, my name's been Rod.
And my name's been Zach.
See you on the flip side. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Oh, yeah.